We're here. Welcome, everyone. Before we get started, would you mind if I asked everyone in the room how many people have read the book?
Oh, that's awkward.
And that's the way I like to start.
How about who would like to read the book?
Who would like to read the book? Because I only just found out last night. I presumed everyone in the room will have read the book and wants to come along and find out more and ask questions. And a friend of mine who's been here many times before said, oh, no, people will potentially buy tickets to sessions and things and then just come along and want to hear from authors. Can I ask, who's read the book and who... I can't ask both. Who's read the book?
Oh, 2 hands up there.
Stop
I love
it. And so the rest of you have not read the book yet. I guarantee you will after this. It is a book that the world needs right now, and it's life-changing. It's changed my life through reading this book. And I was telling Julia about some of those things backstage, and we will get into those. Just before we do get into it, I want to jump back and surprise you with something, actually.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Good.
Again.
Okay.
I had a friend tell me about something where a few years back she was in a horrible place mentally, and you reached out to her and offered her a copy of your book. You said, I'd like to send you my book because I'd...
Oh.
Do you know who it is?
Who was it?
Well, I was going to say, how many do you do this to? And this person I was speaking to last night, and she said to me, that's actually a really brave thing to do because she's an author herself and can seem kind of, my book could really help you.
I know.
Right?
I know, you have to temper it.
She responded with, I have your book, I love it, and I've got the audiobook, and I love it. And she'd been through it many, many times, and yes, it did help her.
Yeah, right.
Do you know who?
I don't.
It's Julie.
Sorry.
I'll tell her that.
No, but tell me who it is.
Julie Goodwin.
Oh, Julie Goodwin, yes.
Yeah, so...
Yes, that's right. No, you know what? Because I saw her on MasterChef and crying about things she'd been through. And I was so affected by that, you know, because everyone loves Julie Goodwin. And I was like, oh, you poor love. Like, I know what it's like to be in times that are really dark and really horrible. And obviously, I'm not like a psychologist or psychiatrist or lifestyle guru. But when I was coming out of such a dark place, I wrote about it, and I wrote about what got me through. So that's why I was like, I wonder if I could... I asked her if I could send it to her. And then I discovered that she'd been ocean swimming, and she's... That was
what she said last night. Yeah. She goes, tell her she was the one who introduced me to ocean swimming.
Oh, that's so great. Yeah, that makes me really happy. But I know that probably does sound pretentious to send it. But
absolutely not.
I was just hoping she might find something in it. I was just very moved by how open and vulnerable she was, I think.
So that's Phosphorescence, the first book. This one here deals with grace and acts of grace. And I didn't even know what that was until... Well, I did, but I didn't know it was called that, right? Until reading the book. And, you know, I think of what you did there in reaching out to Julie. It's brave to actually do that, to put yourself out there. And like Julie said last night, she said, it's quite a vulnerable... You could feel very vulnerable doing it, but it was actually an act of grace yourself because it really, it touched her. You're doing that.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for telling me that.
You, there's so many things about the impact that first book, and we'll get to Bright Shining in just a second, but just going back a bit, I know that in this book you talked about the impact it had on some people and the things that they would say to you, like... people would read it to someone on their deathbed and...
Be buried with it, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Someone just recently had lunch, my best friend had lunch with someone who said, I didn't commit suicide because of that book. And that alone is why you would write. You know what I mean? That alone is so... To think that you could be with someone in their most intensely... lonely and dark period and say, but the light might appear. Just hold on. Another day. And you know what? You're not alone. And people have walked this or crawled this or slid bumpily down this path before. Yeah. Because
that's one of the toughest things, isn't it? Because at that time, because you're so in your own head, you can feel so alone. And it can really help knowing that you're not.
Yeah, totally.
And that can come from a book.
Yeah, exactly. that's one of the greatest things about reading, right? Is that you know you're not a very, well, maybe you might still remain a strange person, but you realise there's other strange people out there.
Oh, so many. Yeah. I could point them out to you. But how do you deal with that when you hear some of these really heavy things that people have said to you about the book? What is that? How do you process that?
Yeah, I think, as I said, it's like an honour to be with someone in that period. Like, it's got nothing to do with me. You're just telling stories about getting through, and that it's possible to get through. So when I wrote Phosphorescence, I was really conscious of a couple of things. Firstly, I didn't want to write about another book about happiness. There's lots of books about happiness. You get a little bit happier. You know, we all know what to do. You have your smoothies, you go for walks, you see your mates. You know what I mean? Just, yeah, all that stuff we know. I wanted to write about what you do when you don't want to get out of bed, when it's an effort to even walk down the corridor, when you're so in pain, you're like, why? When you're dealing with immense grief or immense suffering, and almost everyone in this room will have been touched by that in some way. They will have lost someone, they will have faced significant health challenges, and I wanted to kind of go to that exact point and to write about the fact that I had been amazed by what got me through, and that still gets me through, which was honestly this pursuit of awe and wonder and opening yourself up to the world and paying attention to the world. And another thing that I was acutely conscious of was I didn't want to come across, because I speak so much about ocean swimming and immersion in the natural world and awe, which I'm a big advocate of awe, because I think stitching awe into your life is incredibly life-changing. But I didn't want to come across like, oh, you know, your husband's just died, or you've had this terrible diagnosis, something awful has happened, just go and sit under a tree or go and jump in the ocean, even though those things are good to do. I didn't want to appear like they were really facile solutions to really intense problems. I wanted to say, life is really hard, and we have got so much to get through, like ourselves on an individual level, let alone collectively as humanity right now. Work out what it is that makes you strong and do that. And for me, pursuing awe made me strong in a way that was kind of magical and very surprising to me.
When, at the start of the book, I'm not going to ruin anything for those who haven't read it. I can't believe he dies.
Yeah, I was going to say, I survived.
No, kidding. Like I say, I went into it not really knowing what grace was, and you start off talking about that.
Yeah.
And the first chunk of the book actually is...
What is this thing?
What is grace?
Yeah, because a lot of it is about being able to not put your finger on it. A lot of authors and writers go, I don't know, I've seen it, I like it, I know when it shows up, but I don't know exactly what it is. So I was really trying to work out what it was.
I actually thought that's what the whole book was going to be.
What is this thing?
Just a massive book of, and that's what grace is. Which it kind of is, but through stories, incredible stories. But can you explain then, for those who haven't read the book?
Yeah.
I mean, you must be able to sum it up by now.
Yeah, but can I just, before I get...
It's like 6 words.
Oh.
No, I'm kidding.
I was about to do a lot more. Before I get to the definition, can I explain kind of where it came from? Because... When I was doing all this study of awe is something that makes you stop in your tracks and marvel at the world and feel small, like seeing oceans, seeing whales breach, or seeing a tiny plant bloom in your garden, or watching magpies sing, or whatever. Like, everyone has their own forms of awe, but it is about paying attention to the world. And I saw this research about how good it is for your mental health, for your physical health. And again and again and again, these studies have shown that, and also how it makes people altruistic, much more connected to other people. They feel more like inhabitants of the earth. And so in thinking about it, I became very interested in this one question. After I'd written Phosphorescence and that was out, I was looking at, well, how is it that most people experience awe? And you would think, especially all of you living here in this incredible beauty, you'd think it was nature. And there was a guy called Dasha Keltner who did a study of 26 people from 26 countries, 2,600 people, and he got them all to write a journal talking about when they experienced awe. And it could be art, architecture, going to see your favourite football team, what they call collective effervescence. It could be in protests, it could be in trees, whatever. And he found that the number one way that people experience awe is by seeing acts of beauty in each other. It's in other people. And other people, great kindness, generosity, decency, overcoming of obstacles. And that really struck me because I felt like we don't talk about that very much. And when we do, it seems sentimental or naive, and not to say, well, this is the important stuff that infects us and uplifts us and keeps our whole society going. So,
and it's actually been measured. You talk about that in the book, spoiler.
Yeah.
I say things and then I say spoiler. That's the wrong way to do it. It's not really a spoiler, but it's been measured in people, the actual, what's seeing, like things like acts of grace, and how it, and even on teenagers.
Yep. Your mood, the inflammation, all different kind of physical metrics at all. And of course, I thought what you were referring to then is a lot of scientists look at goosebumps. And that's a measure of when you experience awe.
A scientific measure?
It's a scientific measure. So we both got goosebumps talking before, and I was like, there it is. I really try to clock it when I experience that now. So I started to try to think, that's why I started to write Bright Shining, because I was like, what is this thing that we see in each other? What happens when you experience it? And to me, the fundamentals of grace, to get to your definition, is really loving kind of the unlovable. It is giving acts of generosity and kindness and decency to people who don't necessarily deserve it. It's caring in a way that doesn't expect return. It's mercy, it's not merit. For example, you're at a hospital, someone comes in with a broken leg and you don't go, so who did you vote for in the last election? And where do you live? Who are you?
It'd be a strange start to the...
Imagine. Not inconceivable, actually, but imagine. For example, I've got a whole chapter on blood donors. Who donates blood here? Oh my gosh, so many. So I just find that the most profound and amazing thing to do. And when I speak to blood donor experts, they're like, oh, we can't even fully understand it, why people do that. So you go and you get jabbed with a needle and you asked all these intrusive private questions and your actual blood is taken. And you don't know who that's going to go to. Could be a complete jerk. Could be to someone who in real life you just think, wow, you would almost cross the street to avoid them. But you are doing it because there's a human in need, and it's something that you've got can help them walk longer or further or live longer. And there's something, I think, incredibly profound in that.
My wife has only just started donating blood because she had mad cow disease. Well, she didn't. She lived in England while that was a thing or something. I'm not sure.
You love saying that, don't you?
Kind of do.
My wife, mad cow.
Just ask her, do you get blood? Oh, you can't. The mad cow disease, that's right. But once she did, she said there's this really cool thing that happens now where she was getting, I think it was text messages coming through, letting her know that her blood was on its way down to Victoria.
Oh, wow.
Or something like that. She was getting updates on where her blood was being sent.
That's kind of wild. But
it's
then,
really
cool.
But
then does it fade out once it tells you what person it goes to? Like, you know what I mean? It's landed in the hospital and then silence. And I've had a lot of blood transfusions, and the first time I had it, I would actually never forget it. Like, it's like this wild... It was post-surgery, and I had this nurse who was holding my hand, and she was whispering away to me. And by the way, she used to read the Sydney Morning Herald, which I've written for a long time. And there was another nurse there. I don't know who's going to see David Marr in a moment. But there was another nurse there there was one night I was crying. And I actually hadn't cried for ages, but my kids came in to visit me. And I'd had this big surgery, and then their dad had to take them home. I only had half an hour with them, and I just cried when they left. And this nurse comes in and goes, and he's rubbing my arm really forcefully to try to, reassure me. And was going, no, don't hang in there. You are a strong and intelligent woman, just like David Marr. Every time I see him, I remind him of this. In my dark moment, there he was. The two of us. Anyway, we got through us strong and intelligent women. But So I did have a nurse holding onto my hand when that transfusion was going through me, and it is kind of a magical process. It's both mundane, it happens every day, and completely astonishing. Like giving birth. Like, is there anything more awe-inspiring than actually producing a human?
Nurses are incredible.
Yes.
And there's a section in the book where you talk about a couple of nurses during the pandemic.
Oh, yeah.
And actually, your book has affected me in so many ways. There was something that I did because of this nurse's story, but...
what was it?
I don't. I'll tell you, in a podcast that I was recording with someone the other day, and ex-Ambo, who's now out with because of PTSD, we got chatting, and I told him about the thing that I did because of your book, and I started crying. And it's the first time I've cried in 7 years.
Wow.
Because I've been on these anxiety meds that actually make it that I can't cry. I physically can't cry.
Yeah.
And that was really confusing when that happened. But it was essentially, it was around and I was listening to you because I had the audio book going while I was on the treadmill. And there's a picture for you.
Yeah.
And you got to the bit where you talked about the nurse who had someone in a shop. She stopped at a shop. She was all in her nurse gear. And the lady said to her, I didn't know you were just a nurse.
Yeah.
And so she went home and, well, you tell the story.
Yeah, I should be reading it from my book now.
There are a couple of things I'd like you to read from the book, but I'd take note of the pages. But
lucky
that's fine.
We've got one up there. No, but she really basically wrote home and said, like, I can take every... we're going to pull it out now. Do you want me to do it?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Now I need to remember where it is. Oh, good.
You chat, I'll find it.
He's read it most recently. I'll tell you, while you're looking that up, I can talk about the Brazilian one. Did you want to get to that?
I just went to look for the search function. Are we on the Wi-Fi?
Everything is okay.
Do you find yourself doing it, like trying to...
Yeah,
zoom in on pages?
Definitely zooming. Yeah.
Yes, the
You're going to be
Brazilian
okay
one,
finding that now?
Because if the Brazilian one first, if you can, about the
while
hands,
you're looking for that, without the search function.
Yeah.
So obviously, one of the worst things of the pandemic was the time that the fact that we couldn't go in and be with people who were really ill in hospital and dying in hospital, and nurses, apart from everyone's families and obviously the people that were suffering in that way, nurses found it very difficult as well to kind of witness that and know that these people were alone. And there were these two nurses in Brazil who were on their lunch hour and talking about it and how difficult it was. And in Brazil, the Prime Minister had just said, it's just a flu. And before you knew it, completely out of control, hospitals overwhelmed, really high rate of COVID in that country. So they had remembered some technique they'd heard about in some nursing training course, and they decided to put it into action when they went back in. And it's kind of hard to explain, but they got...
I found that section.
Okay, they got a pair of like those rubber gloves, and they filled them with water and kind of knotted them at the fingers with warm water, and then knotted them at the end, and then slid them over that person's hand. And so it felt like their hands were being held. And I managed to track them down in Brazil with the help of one of my friends, and they said the amazing thing about it was, and they called them the hands of love or the hands of God. It got some media attention. The amazing thing was that it immediately had an impact on their vitals, their oxygen perfusion, and a range of other things. And obviously this is a rubber glove and some warm water, but actually it was the act of love from a stranger as well that was physically having an impact on people, and it brought it to they brought it to other hospitals in the area as well. And to me, that was just such a beautiful example of people caring for others. And they just said to me, this was someone's wife, daughter, uncle, aunt, colleague, someone who needed to be loved in that moment. And I found that incredibly moving, actually. Oh, we've got Caitlin's
Got
thing.
one. Do you want to read the whole thing?
I'll read part of it because it's quite long.
Yeah, it is quite long.
Caitlin Brassington is her name. And I have to say, are there any nurses here? I love nurses so much. Oh, we've got one over here. Hello. And I've spent a lot of time in hospitals, and I've spent a lot of time watching nurses and the way they anticipate your pain when you can't articulate it, the way they paper over like a million little indignities, the way they'll just come in quietly and look after you and when they're exhausted. And I've seen people yell at them. I've seen people be in fevers or angers or like various psychoses, and day after day they deal with that stuff. And I just think nurses cannot be thanked enough and should be paid more, just quietly. Also loudly. Thank you. I mean, who else has been in that situation though when you're in hospital and you're watching? You're like, is there any more important work? Name me more important work than what they're actually doing? So Caitlin's got 3 kids, left them at home, and she's running off to grab some food on her way back from work, bumps into someone. You just didn't know you were just a nurse. She said, I've helped babies into the world, many of whom needed assistance to take their first breath. And yet, I'm just a nurse. I've held patients' hands and ensured their dignity while they take their last breath. And yet, I'm just a nurse. I've counselled grieving parents after the loss of a child. And yet, I've performed CPR on patients, brought them back to life. And yet, I'm just a nurse. She's a lecturer in a school of medicine, her patient's advocate in a health system that does not always put her patient's best interest first. And yet just a nurse. I can take blood, cannulate and suture a wound. I can manage a cardiac arrest in a newborn, a child or an adult. I can tell you the dosage of adrenaline or amiodarone based on weight that your child may need to bring them back to life, and yet I'm just a nurse. I provide comfort, compassion, emotional and social support to patients and their families in their darkest times, and yet I'm just a nurse. I have been screamed at, vomited on, and urinated on, but I still come to work and do my job, and yet I'm just a nurse. I have the experience, knowledge, and competence that has saved and will continue to save people's lives, and yet just a nurse. So yes, lovely acquaintance in the corner store, if I'm just a nurse, then I'm ridiculously proud to be one. So yes.
I don't want to say this next bit because I've got emotions now. But I can't do it. I stepped off the treadmill and shot my sister a text. Can you just...
Oh, wow. I sent this to my sister. Oh, just FYI, when I tell people my sister is a nurse, I'm proud. Aww.
But
what a beautiful brother.
No, but the thing is, and that's why I wanted to bring it up, is your book made me do that. That's so powerful.
But that's there already in you. It just made you stop to think about it.
But that's the thing, right? It's recognising those things and then acting on them.
Yeah. Honouring it, really, yeah.
And so the more examples that you see of it, and it talks about that in the book, about it's catchy.
Yeah, it's infectious.
Yeah.
Exactly. There's a lot of stuff. Social scientists call this moral elevation, and if you're interested in this or you're running any organisations, there's a whole bunch of articles on this in the Harvard Business Review. And it's about the impact on people of watching, especially in a workplace or organisation, of watching someone at the top behave in a way, not loudly, not requiring applause, but in a way that is like selfless or devoted or dedicated or cutting someone's slack. What that can mean for everyone around you. And it is incredibly infectious. And that's why I'm so intent on us talking about it more. Because I think that now we're in a time when social media is highlighting the worst of who we are. And in a way telling us we're worse than we are, I think. And we forget that beauty. We forget what we're capable of when we don't necessarily see it in our leaders.
You do sometimes, because there's a segment in the book that I could not believe when I got to this section. I went, I saw this clip on my socials yesterday. I have a very different social media feed, I think, to a lot of people, because I'm not to a lot of people. I'm a very positive person. I have no time for any of that negative, horrible stuff. And the algorithm will give you what you're into.
Yeah.
And so this clip came up, and then when I read about it in the book, I was like, wow, that's amazing that you're actually referencing that. It was a clip, it came up and it said, it was essentially addressing the current political situation in the States, and it said, this is the way political opponents used to treat each other.
Oh, did it have it had McCain and oh right, you've got a good algorithm.
Yeah,
I want that. Yeah,
I couldn't believe it, and I watched the whole thing. I was like, oh, that is incredible. I'd never seen it before. And then when I looked it up online last night, it was 10 years ago. I think. So it's funny that
a bit over 10 years ago. 2012 wasn't it? I think
2012 was it? It's
incredible.
Well,
depends which one. It depends which clip they were, but if you look back to
there were two of them, and they were stuck together in the same thing.
Oh, so it was it Romney and Obama, and saying it was my wedding anniversary and congratulations, and it's good to be here with you.
Oh, there was that one as well. Okay, there were three. Yeah. Yes, it was that one where they were speaking beautifully on stage. But the John McCain...
John McCain, he was a Republican, was doing a town hall, and a woman says to him, asking questions, and she goes, Barack Obama, he's a terrorist and he's an Arab. Now, that was really a common thought at that time. And, I'm worried about it. And he says, no, ma'am, no, we happen to disagree about what to do with this country, but he's a good man and he cares about this country, and so do I. And I get like goosebumps. When I talk about, but we're getting it, because that seems to be so rare now in terms of ripping people down. I do actually think our leaders underestimate how much we want to see that, and we want to see decency and people just getting together and, I don't know, sorting out some of our problems, instead of creating some more in terms of the way we talk to each other. And I also did love the way Obama was one time when he was campaigning for Hillary Clinton. He was giving a speech and he was being heckled by a Trump supporter. And the crowd starts yelling at that Trump supporter. And he goes, no, everyone, wait. First of all, this man is an elder. We've got to respect our elders. Secondly, it looks like he served our country. He was a veteran, and he owes all of our respect for that. And thirdly, this is not who we are. You guys need to focus. You've got to focus on the right thing. It's not about tearing other people down. And that, again, is so arresting. And even when we don't see it that much, even though I think we had a very civil election recently in many ways, which was wonderful, but even when we don't see it that much, we have to hold on to that. And in a way, kind of demand it, I think.
Was that one in the book?
Yep.
Yeah. Because I was like, that must have been in the clip as well. I saw that one.
Yeah, you're getting confused.
I was like, you nearly did it word for word. That's because you wrote it in the book. Okay. That was another amazing one. You recently, when your book, When Bright Shining, which through the entire thing, I'm like, why didn't you call it Grace? It's all about grace. Why didn't you go? Last chapter. Okay, then I understood.
We think, weirdly, everyone calls it Grace. It's funny.
Oh, yeah.
They just say that book, they forget that what its title was. It's
and then you want to say Shining Bright, but it's...
Bright Shining.
Yeah. I mean, it's not ruining anything.
No.
To say where Bright Shining comes from. Does anyone know where Bright Shining... Not ones who've read the book.
Does anyone know if I said Bright Shining like the sun?
Does that ring any bells?
No.
Yeah. Someone said it.
Amazing Grace, yeah.
Huh. Goosebumps.
So, because to me, I felt that grace was very much like the sun, in the sense that it warms you. It's a source of so much life. But up close, it's also gritty and hard and difficult. It is not about, deciding to forgive someone who has harmed you, deciding to go on and care for people who actually don't necessarily deserve it or haven't done anything to merit it. They're just sick and in front of you, requires grit and requires strength. And so when people say, grace is very sentimental and it's just about, Kleenex ads and, making someone biscuits or something, which actually is an excellent form. I would never put that down. And Joe's biscuits are amazing. I just had several. Where was I? Oh, yeah, Bright Shining. So I've always loved that line in Amazing Grace. Now, we've been there 10,000. It talks about being in heaven, bright shining like the sun. And I just loved that way of describing the sun. But I also was really interested in the history of this hymn, so written by a slave trader who then repented and became an abolitionist. But then that song was sung by African Americans as it was a very important amongst many slaves and against people who were part of the abolitionist movement. Now that phrase, that actual stanza that contains "bright shining like the sun," was not written by the original writer of the hymn, but it was first recorded in Uncle Tom's Cabin by Harriet Beecher Stowe. So it was built upon. It's this thing of beauty, I think, about how we're wretched and kind of seeking some kind of light. But it's been built upon, and then became a civil rights anthem. And I found in my research that it was something people often sang and went to when they had no words to say. People would sing this song. I found records of people singing it in prison over and over again when they had nothing else to say. It's been sung at various sites, at the 9/11 memorial site, at the burning of the Grenfell Towers memorial. Like it's almost like fills in for a wordlessness.
Another Obama moment that you talk about in the book with that song as well.
Yeah, I don't know if any of you have not seen this. I would recommend going back home and looking this up on YouTube, because Barack Obama had this moment as president. So after Sandy Hook, 20 children gunned down 6-year-olds. Congress did nothing about guns. And he said, I don't know what I'm going to do if when there's another massacre, because what can I say? What can I possibly say? We did nothing. Like, at what point will we do something? And then, inevitably, another massacre, and he's called to speak at it. And a friend of his, Reverend Clementa Pinckney, had died at it. And he tells this story to Bruce Springsteen in that Renegades podcast they did together. And he says, driving down there, he was like, I don't know what to say. But he'd been corresponding with Marilyn Robinson, the wonderful author, about the idea of grace, being that reservoir of goodness beyond which we can do, good things to each other in the ordinary course of life. So it's extraordinary goodness done in the ordinary course of life. And he stood up and he spoke about grace. And then he pauses and he starts to sing. And he sings Amazing Grace. And it's so stunning watching this, because there's all these people grieving. Like, it's horrific. And yet people standing to their feet with him, and they're kind of weeping and they're singing. And I felt like he did something astonishing, which was to say, yes, all of this is bleak and horrible, but we have to hold on to hope. We have to hold on to the fact that we can be better and we can do better. And people rose to their feet with him. And that, to me, is a very remarkable gift to be able to do that.
I learned so many things from this book. One was the story behind Amazing Grace, like to hear that stuff. Also, your grandmother would say a certain saying, and I had never questioned where the saying comes from. And we say it all the time, usually at kids that are carrying on like pork chops.
Oh, yeah.
I have never questioned where the saying carrying on like a pork chop comes from. It's not what a lot of people would take away from your book.
Yeah. No one else has ever mentioned that, so thank you.
It was so funny. I had this moment. Again, I was washing the Podvan, headphones on, and I actually had to stop and pause it and go, wait, what? Is that the saying?
Yeah, you carry on like a pork chop. And I didn't look that up. I just assumed they just sizzle and crackle and carry on in the sauce in the fry pan.
Carrying on like a pork chop, spitting oil on a hot pan.
Yeah, that's
what now it makes sense.
I know, it's such a good phrase, actually.
I think it's great. You, in talking about the Amazing Grace, the author, the one who wrote that, and his actual story, there's a lot in there as well about the big names through history and the horrible things they did.
Oh, yeah.
Yet and so many of them I didn't even know. I only know their awesome songs.
Oh, yeah. Dodgy dudes out there.
Dodgy dudes. Good
mate.
Chapter name.
Yeah.
But I think the big thing, what I took from it was that, and you said it in there, we are complex beings and we're not just one thing. There are people who can do incredible, amazing things and also horrible things.
Yeah.
And they can do horrible things and then actually end up doing amazing things later in life. And there were a few examples in there of those.
Yeah. I think I was kind of trying to say two things. One is, yes, we're incredibly complex and people can make mistakes, and we all make mistakes. The more conscious you are of your own, the more likely you are to accept that other people can stuff up. And remorse and redemption, we need to allow for all of those things. And I wrote a biography of Queen Victoria, which I absolutely loved doing. But when you're wrestling with a life, you're not aiming to judge. You're telling a story, right? But you are really understanding that a person can be capable of both incredible tenderness and incredible cruelty all at once, and sometimes on the same day. And how do we assess that? And how do we understand it? And what is the measure and the mark of a life? But I also, and sometimes I think we can be too quick to cancel people who just make mistakes, genuine mistakes and stuff-ups, which I make all the time. Like, we all say stupid things before breakfast, to paraphrase Alice in Wonderland. But I was also trying to say that forgiveness is something I really wrestled with in this book. Like, that was the hardest bit. And I just went deeper and deeper into it, because while I've always been brought up to know that forgiveness is a very powerful thing and a very important thing, I've also, as a journalist, reported on victims of domestic violence and sexual assault. I've seen the concept of forgiveness be weaponised in certain communities. And then I think that we are in a context where we're often told to forgive, or just not even forgive, just to let it go, just to let people act, just a culture of impunity, that's fine. I don't know, boys will be boys, or these kinds of assaults happen, or this goes on. So I wanted to be very careful about that and understand that this isn't, by talking about forgiveness, you're not saying, oh, everything's tickety-boo. And that's okay for you to carry on like that, but that you can, and that it's never free from consequences. There should be consequences, especially if there's legal consequences, but that you can go through a process yourself of a reckoning or an unburdening from what someone has done to you. So I think that's what I was trying to say.
Oh, and there's some incredible examples of people, and I guess that is them. I mean, is that them showing grace? I think of the lady down in Sydney and the is it a kindergarten, justice? The preschool?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So the woman she was in Western Sydney, and she was dropping off one of her kids, and she had a couple of her own kids in the car, and she got the accelerator and the brake confused, or she was reaching down to grab a water bottle, and smashed into the kindergarten and killed 2 kids. And awful story, just absolutely awful. And what was amazing in that was one of the parents, the father, who on the way to his son's funeral, jihad, in the back you could see the green coffin, was filming something on the dashboard of his car and saying, I know that everyone's attacking this woman, and I want you to stop. She's a widow. This was not something she intended to do. She's got kids at the school. She's got kids with disabilities. She is suffering enough. And we forgive her, and we will sit down and we will have a meal with her. And that was not something he had to do. He was in the middle of this incredible grief. And when I followed that court case through and saw that at that trial, the woman's daughter stood up and said she lives in hell every single day of her life and she wishes it was her, you realise how important it is to have those moments of humanity. I don't think you can ever tell another person to forgive, but I think you can allow for the possibility. One other story I was really struck by was, I did a lot of work on research into restorative justice. And there was one woman called Debbie McGrath. So her brother was murdered by his best friend. And she's at home, she's 24 years old, she gets a call in the middle of the night, she's heavily pregnant, your brother's been killed. And there was a court case, and the friend went to jail for a long time, but she said she became filled with a kind of hate that consumed her for 10 years. She couldn't sleep, she got diabetes, she had all these kind of health problems, her father had all these health problems. She said that she was just consumed with this hate, that she told me she would be looking at a sunset and thinking about the ways in which she could murder this guy herself. And eventually she sat down with him and had a restorative justice session. And again, they're very carefully managed, these sessions. There's a lot of preparation being put in, and there always has to be remorse on the part of the offender, the person that caused harm. You can't just go in without that. And she just said to him, "This is what you did to me. My health, my life. This is what you did to my father." And went through everything that happened to him. "This is what you did to my nephew who never had a father growing up." And she said that was weird because at some point she involuntarily or unconsciously kind of looked around her because it felt like something had been lifted from her. She felt like someone had physically lifted something from her. And she said she just took the suitcase of everything he'd done to her and her family and gave it to him. And she's like, "I don't know if you call that forgiveness. I don't know if you call that a loosening. I don't know what you call it." But at that moment, she was freed. And she said, "I can't," mentally she still is like, it's amazing because that's the person that caused me the most grief. And yet in an encounter with that person, I was freed. And what she was most worried about was that she wouldn't be able to love again because for her, love was represented with loss. And the last time I spoke to her, she's like loving her grandchildren and absolutely adoring it. And I just found that's not a prescriptive story. It's not an easy story. It's incredibly difficult. But I think that we must allow for the fact that those moments can happen and can transform you.
And there's lots of things in there as well about... I didn't realise that it was called grace. For me, it's just cutting other people some slack, a bit of slack.
That's true. But that's just that's probably an Aussie way to put it.
Yeah.
No worries.
Yeah, grace
Give them a go.
sounds so much nicer. But
tell us about your encounter with the guy downstairs.
Oh, I just spotted him up the back of the room, actually. So.
Oh, our local hero, yes.
I think it's him. I haven't got my glasses on. May not even be a man. Did I see you downstairs? Yeah, it was
there
you.
There we go. Okay, tell it even better.
Oh, now I don't want to.
You're actually a little bit pink.
I'll only say it because it's just for you to show what your book has done and that compounding effect and how it is. It's infectious. So as I was walking in here to come in and do this chat, I went round that way and I walked past the first aid room downstairs and I saw this man in there setting up for his day. He's got his first aid shirt on and setting things up. And in my mind, I went, what a legend. And that was all. And I walked past and I got halfway around the side here and I went, no. And I walked back around, went in and I just said, excuse me. And I went over and shook his hand and said, thank you for everything that you do. And that was it. And his face lit up.
Thank you, good sir.
Thank you for what you do. But yeah.
I love that though. And I love that you told me that because honestly, it's just a question of paying attention. Because that's in you. You're obviously a very kind and warm and open person, right? So it's just a question of you thinking about it and going, oh yeah, look at what that person does every day without big roomfuls, or every weekend without big roomfuls of applause, because he wants to help people, and that is an honourable and great thing. I was reading this study on awe this week. It was the first study that showed that awe helps mental health. And it was on long sufferers of COVID, actually. And what I was intrigued by it was that people were taken through a course of... They always have a sad control group that doesn't have a good time. But
Pick me!
Yeah. That's a good book, isn't it? We're all the control group. Anyway, so then there's the people who, were taught about awe, and they didn't have to download any apps. There was no actual specific meditation or things that they had to do. They just had to learn, switch their minds, and they were taught to pay attention to the everyday and to their local parks and their local communities and the things around them. And the jump in the impact on those who were depressed in that group was very significant. And I can see why, because it's just you're just going, oh yeah. And you would have seen that guy before and acknowledged that, but you're just, because you're in this mindset, you're just a bit more likely to go, hang on a minute, that actually is quite an astonishing thing.
Tell you about my crazy algorithm in my social media feed. There's this guy who's started popping up, and I didn't realise he was here on the Central Coast. I thought he must be between here and Northern Beaches. His name's Callum, and to look at him, he's got mullet, yeah, I'd say mullet, tattoos all over his face.
Yeah.
And he goes around the place just like trying to put smiles on faces, I think, is all he's doing. When I'm out on walks, I quite often just want to high-five people. I haven't done it yet. Okay, that told me don't do it. It is weird, isn't it?
Not
but
really.
just seeing, like, with the guy downstairs before, seeing his face light up, and I walked away, like, with goosebumps and stuff, and went, oh, that felt good.
But you know what? The important thing is that these are the stories that we tell. And the stories we tell our children, like so many of us will have seen adolescents, and there's so much negativity, especially with blokes and especially with the Andrew Tate world. No, talk about what... We don't know your name. We've just talked about you endlessly.
Looks like a Steve. Gary.
What is it? Richard.
Thank you.
Talk about what Richard does, and talk about what Callum does, and talk about these people that, like, selflessly uphold the community in all these different ways, and the people that donate blood, and the people who work in hospitals and what they see. This is who we are. And I think we have to really focus on telling those stories to understand ourselves better, because there's something about social media that is fostering lies about who we are that I think we have to push back on. Yeah.
Great call. We have some time for questions in the room. And do we have a microphone to go around? Great, excellent. Who wants to go first? Oh, great. Down in the middle there.
Oh, thank you. Dr. Martin Luther King was on a talk show in 1967, and he was asked about the riots that were breaking out in American cities, and he quoted Victor Hugo, who said, I'm paraphrasing, "Sins are committed in a state of darkness, but criminality or responsibility has to be given to those who create the darkness." Bearing in mind what you said about, and then he went on to say, well, the instigators didn't create slavery, and they didn't create the ghettos, and they didn't create, drugs and what have you, or substance abuse. Should we amend that to say consideration has to be given to those that create the darkness, or thinking about the conditions for crime without necessarily abrogating responsibility?
Do you mean historical crimes? Like, do you need to...
Anything. I suppose when a judge judges a case, they take into consideration the person's background and the things they're dealing with. And before
definitely we need to understand. Like, the number one thing I kept coming back to, because as we know, as I was saying, I spent a lot of time on forgiveness. Like, and it's the cliche, isn't it, about walking in someone else's shoes. But the only way we're going to understand each other is if we continue to try to work out where someone is coming from. I've been looking at so much research in the US, which has been documenting a rise of contempt. There's this guy called Tim Shriver who says the main problem in the US is not polarisation, it's contempt. So we go from thinking, oh, that person's, their ideas are a bit, to that person's a complete, like a horrible person, and then it's that person is trying to destroy my way of life, and then it's that person is demonic or evil, and that's what we've seen. We saw that in the last election over there. I mean, the use of the word demonic to describe opponents is pretty wild. And if we're not living in communities like this one where we kind of know that people can be different and think differently and vote differently, and yet still will come down to the surf club, we'll still volunteer at the local school, we'll still, that's what actually gives us tolerance. So the more we can do to understand where someone comes from, it doesn't mean they're off the hook. It means you understand where this comes from, because it's not like a random act of evil or someone who's out to get you. Maybe that person has had horrors in their own life, or still that they're not talking about. John Lewis, who was the American politician and civil rights leader, said that, he was quite a saintly man, quite an astonishing soul, but he said that he would walk along some of those civil rights marches in the 1960s and 70s and see faces of hate lined along the way, just hate looking at him. And he would just look at them and think, you were a baby once. Like, what went wrong? What went wrong there? And I think we have to continue to approach it that way. Otherwise, we will just think the whole world is full of horror and everyone is out to get us, when it's kind of patently not the same. And we do need to understand the motivations of people we might consider our opponents or people who do things wrong. I spent a lot of time reading up about people on death row for this, and Sister Helen Prejean, who was in Dead Man Walking, with Sean Penn, and the way she approached, so she spends time with rapists and murderers that everyone else is like, how can you? Look at what that person did to my son or my community, or how can you? And she's spending time with them as they're walking towards their death. And there was one time with that guy that the Sean Penn plays, when this isn't in the movie, I don't think, but she spends time saying to him, he had no remorse and he wouldn't take responsibility. But one day he said, yes, I think when I die, the family might have some peace. And she was like, oh, that's it. There's a glimmer of humanity in him. And I will work with that. And I was so struck by it. How often do we look for that glimmer of humanity when we approach things the other way? But if you're interested in this, if you have a look at any of her social media feeds now, they're full of her trying to appeal to judges and courts and legislatures to get people off death row, saying, please let me tell you the story of this man. He was drinking whiskey out of his infant's bottle. Was one I was reading through recently. Look at the life he's had, that he's got to this point. And I think it's just a very fundamental part of compassion and empathy to be to that way. And so thank you for that question.
It may not excuse it, but it can help you
doesn't
understand.
It. Still go to jail,
You still go to jail?
Yes,
yeah.
do your time for the crime that's been served, but it's we don't parcel people off as beyond comprehension.
Any more questions in the room? Yep. Stand in the front there.
Julia. Yes. It's divinely articulated wisdom. The tears are dribbling down my face. What makes you? What brings you to writing books like Phosphorescence and Bright Shining? How do you go about it? Does it just ooze out of you, or do you have to actively set about it?
Do you know what? If there hadn't been another question, that was my question.
Yeah.
So perfect.
I don't know about oozing out. Because it's a good question. Thank you. And it's so different. I'm a historian, so the last book I wrote before that was this massive biography of Queen Victoria, which I absolutely loved doing. It is, that rollicking century, that one, and so many rabbit holes I went down. It was really so fun to tell her story. It's things that I've always thought about, and then it just kind of erupted from me after I'd been through a couple of really horrible surgeries. But I found myself being sustained by these things. And I wanted to get that down, and I had a certain urgency for it. I wanted to write it for my kids, ultimately. This is what I've learned, and this is what I understand, that you can nurture an inner light, and you can find it when all the lights are out. And this is an ancient wisdom, and yet you will find it again for yourself. And or is this kind of beautiful and surprising magic? And it also, on a selfish level, it keeps me going. I'm training my mind to think about those things, often when I'm recovering from a long surgery. And the Bright Shining, I was really every day thinking, what is the best of us? Who are we and who can we be, and what would it be like if we spoke more about it? The Bright Shining was kind of strange because after I finished Phosphorescence and then had this wild response to it that I hadn't anticipated. I just thought it's a funny little book of essays for me, my kids. I've done that. and now I can go off and do something else. But I was interested in the beautiful responses I had. It's almost like warped my view of humanity because I get such gorgeous correspondence from beautiful people. And then I got interested in grace between people and how we don't speak about it enough. But what happened was I took my kids to Ningaloo, which I'd always wanted to do. I don't know if anyone here who's been to Ningaloo. Oh my gosh, it's the most amazing place. Amazing. And I took my kids and we swam with whale sharks, and they really struggled because they couldn't get Wi-Fi at the place we were staying at, and they still talk about it. The other day I heard one of them saying to the other, can you remember that time we went away and we didn't have Wi-Fi?
Losing their streaks on Snapchat.
It was streaks.
There was a big Pokemon battle that was on. Couldn't get online.
They were so dramatic and it was so funny. But I remember my son who was like, oh, there's a Pokemon battle that day. Would that be okay if I did that? It wasn't okay. And he came with me. And afterwards I remember him saying, oh, I wouldn't. The whale sharks were amazing. And I'm like, well, see, I mean, I didn't want to do I told you so. But I'm like, see, it is better than Pokemon. He's like, but I didn't know what it was going to be like. And I'm like, see, exactly. You've got to open yourself. So I took them, and then we had 4 days or something, and then I flew back to Sydney and took them to their dad's, and then flew back again to Ningaloo. And it was there that I wrote a good chunk of the next book, almost like in this reef dreaming state. It was great. And I'm at the edge of the edge of the continent there, and it's teeming with life and this coral. So you're surrounded by this beauty and this awe. And I was just trying to think about the best of who we were. It was wonderful. Thank you for asking.
Great question, because that's where it came out, right? You're swimming next to that turtle.
Yeah.
There are so many amazing moments through the book, and I actually recommend, if you haven't read it, get the book and the audio book as well, because because you read it yourself, it's great. It gives it a whole new feel as well, which then I just read the book in your voice anyway, so after hearing that. All right, it is time for us to wrap this up.
Can I just say how delightful it has been to be interviewed by you? You're so thoughtful and receptive and interested, and so what a joy. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you. It's my first time ever doing this. I've never done anything like this.
He might be familiar with a microphone, though.
Do you know what? Julia Goodwin, so she's a great mate of mine. We used to do breakfast radio together, and in preparation for this, she's been quite mean to me. She quite often is, and she was saying about when, I think it was last year, she was here and was being interviewed, and she said, the guy was interviewing me, he had this notebook and he had Post-it notes everywhere, and he'd done so much research, and I'm like, oh. I'll take my iPad. I'll stick some notes on it around. So, ladies and gentlemen, please thank Julia Baird. All right, so Julia's heading out to the room out the back, just down the back there now, to do some signings and have a chat to you out there as well.